Okay, hello everyone. This is session 4.1 featuring two 20-minute presentations. The first will be creating space for equity education in the library, which will continue until about 3:10. And then we'll have conversations around identity, a book club community in the midst of a pandemic from about 3:10 to 3:30. On behalf of LAUNC-CH, welcome. My name is Ileana Burgos, and I will be one of your moderators today, along with Don Lucas. Please note that this session is being recorded. We ask that you remain muted to limit background noise. Also note that live auto captioning is enabled. If you would like to disable the captions, you can do so by clicking on the live transcript menu at the bottom of your Zoom window and selecting Hide Subtitle. If you have any issues during the session, please let Dawn or I know via chat and we will help you out. There will be time at the end of each presentation for Q&A. When that time comes, you can submit your questions via chat. If you'd prefer to ask your question anonymously, you can do so by direct messaging me or Don Lucas to ask on your behalf. For this first session, note that the presenters will pause and mute themselves at about 3 p.m. That's when their campus will make an announcement on the intercom. They'll resume the presentation when the intercom turns off. Without further ado, let's welcome from East Carolina University, Amy Curtis, Colise Hunt, and Ashley Moore.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Amy Curtis, and we'll hear from Ashley Moore and Colise Hunt in just a minute. Let me pull up our presentation here. So we're going to talk to you guys today about creating space for equity education in the library. I was the chair of our staff development committee this year. And we're all from different departments in the library, so kind of have a different reach. But we decided that our staff development committee would be a great avenue to create some of these additional virtual opportunities for employees to have genuine discussion and for equity education to happen in different ways, especially this year. We saw an obvious need for it in our library working in an academic institution. You can't fix something that you can't see. So again, we decided to focus on creating those opportunities in different ways throughout the year. So Ashley Moore will come join us in 1 second to talk about the first kind of thing that we took on this year.
Good afternoon, everyone. So the first little initiative that I wanted to share with you is something that we as a committee discussed early on in our new officer year is, what could we do as a committee to really promote diversity education at our institution? And we decided to kind of revive something that had gone on in the past, but not with this focus, which I'm sure a lot of libraries have, a reading group or a book club. And since we are still pretty much virtual at this point, with most of our employees working from offsite, we of course decided that it would be a virtual reading group, but we really wanted to take the opportunity to focus in, at least for our first read, on making it something around diversity education and trying to create a less intimidating way to draw people into this topic. A lot of times, we hold formal training sessions and we try and get our employees to sign up or attend a formal training, and it's like a one-time thing and done, and people may or may not participate. They may or may not have a lot of takeaways from that. But we felt like a reading group would be something that would be a little bit more ongoing, a little bit more long-term, and would really help to draw people in. Another thing that we really wanted to do was to create a safe space for discussion to happen, because it's easy. I think one of the things that our book club really talked about a lot this year is how learning about diversity, it's a continuum, it's a journey, and it's not like something that you come to a certain place where you check it off your list and you go on your way. So we wanted to create that opportunity for just more learning and more growth for everybody, no matter where they were coming from on this topic. So first, our chair, Amy Curtis, suggested a book that ended up being our pick for the first book in our read. And we chose How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. This ended up being just a very inspiring read with a lot of good meat for discussion. So if anybody here in the group has read the book, I'm sure you would agree. It's rich with things to discuss. So it really worked well. We decided to meet once a month through a virtual, on a virtual platform so that everybody could participate from where they were at. And that has gone really well. Participation has remained small. We've had anywhere from 8 to 12 participants in any given month during our discussion. So that's something that, we still want to find ways to increase. As we went through thinking about, because we're just now finishing up that first book. And like I say, it's been a really great inspirational journey and has created a lot of good discussion for those of us who have participated. One thing we talked about in trying to choose our next book or our next read is that perhaps the title of that book was a little bit too strong and may have discouraged participants. It's easy for a lot of us to think, if you haven't really delved into diversity education a whole lot, that, well, why would I need to read this book? I'm not a racist. But again, looking at it as more of a continuum and a journey is a better approach. But the title of that book may have scared off some potential participants. That remains to be seen as we look for new titles and find other ways to increase our participation. But overall, our successes have been greater than our failures in this initiative, as we were not only able to have really good discussions and create growth opportunities for a lot of people, this is also a really low or no cost option in having a book club be one of your diversity educational opportunities for employees. A lot of times we can pay out a lot of money and spend a lot of money on bringing in speakers or participating in expensive training sessions that, again, like I mentioned before, may or may not, people may not choose to participate or may not have much takeaway. So a book club can be a way to have continuing and ongoing educational opportunities without putting out a lot of money, which I know right now with most of our budgets, that's an important thing. It's also, like I said, ways to keep things going and to create that safe space where employees can ask questions and have discussions, and we can all learn from our varied experiences. So this is one thing that I think our group has really decided has been a success, and I think we will continue. All right, I'd like to invite Amy back up, and she's going to share a few more things.
So another great opportunity that we were able to take advantage of is working with our Office for Equity and Diversity is incredible here at ECU. They put out a pledge to act against racism and injustice. A lot of our library employees signed that, and they had resources for action-oriented steps to take based on everything listed to the left here related to education, supporting, engaging, etc. So they're just an incredible resource for us, but they put out an opportunity for a mini grant option for action-related things that could happen on campus. So our staff development committee decided to apply, and we were actually one of 6 people selected for this grant throughout ECU's campus. And because of that, we were able to fund library participation in the Equity in Action Library Journal series, fostering an anti-racist library culture. I know this is a whole lot of text on this slide, but I didn't want to pare any of this down. It looks like, I'm sorry.
Please ensure you are properly wearing a mask and maintaining social distance. Hand sanitizer sanitizer and wipes are available at all service desks. Eating is
Our
allowed
clock
only
is
while
off in
working
this
the
room.
playroom.
It'll be over in a second. It was a 3-part workshop series. So the first 3 sessions happened the first day live virtually, another session the next week, and then a 3rd session the 3rd week. I wanted to include all the titles and the authors because it was well worth the money and the time spent. It looks like they're doing this recurring series right now and probably in the future too. So if your library does have the funds some way to get participants included in this particular opportunity, it's well worth it. And if anybody has any questions related to this, I'd be happy to address them. I'm really glad we were able to participate there. And the mini grant that the Office for Equity and Diversity awarded to us went back to partially refunding some of the participants' registration fees. So we ended up having 13 library employees sign up for this intensive workshop training. And then as a committee, we decided to give a collaborative presentation in addition to hopefully reach additional library employees who weren't able to devote so much time to doing the workshop themselves. Not that we could cover absolutely everything as eloquently and intelligently as they did, because there's no comparison, but we did want to at least create that additional discussion when everything feels a little bit disconnected. Virtually, people are coming in the library physically, various schedules. So we had a separate collaborative presentation, not related to anything that we have to do. Another training that we were able to have a collaborative presentation on was by the Racial Equity Institute. And I have links to both of these at the end of our presentation because they were both incredible. So I'd encourage you guys to see if your library would be able to fund that, or we lucked out and our Office for Equity and Diversity actually funded this training where our library wouldn't have been able to finance them because they are incredible. So well worth the money, but it is something that we saw was going on and we wanted to help additionally promote it and connect additionally with other people on campus, but we wouldn't have been able to finance ourselves. But everything they talk about is racial inequality across different systems, and they use different data and statistics to power everything they say and talk about the importance and persistence of narratives, even when they're inaccurate, and why it's such a powerful, powerful thing. So they use a metaphor related to fish in the groundwater that you can see on the screen here. I can't cover everything they went over, but if you look at their website that I have at the end or ask additional questions, I'm happy to try. We did a collaborative presentation after that workshop as well. And we actually had it during our library forum where a lot of employees kind of just bank on definitely attending library forum, but it's different presenters every month. So we as a committee did a lot of additional work that wasn't necessary, that we just wanted to present these additional discussion opportunities and education opportunities to employees. In addition to that, within the committee, we all kind of have our own different styles presenting and receiving information. So I included this slide because I like to create little visuals and kind of talk about what spoke most to me from each of the presenters, whereas other people would pick one speaker or one topic and talk about why that related to their specific job and role in the library. And I didn't really want to quash that creative choice of what they wanted to focus on. So that was really successful. We had outside speakers from our Office for Equity and Diversity. We welcomed them into our virtual library forum. So that increased participation as well, because they were able to talk about additional things that we could look forward to in emails and virtual events. And we're going to go really quickly to Colise to talk about our last big initiative for the year here.
I'm going to talk to you briefly today about Staff Development Day. Our Staff Development Day actually takes place tomorrow, March 9th, from about 9:15 to 3:30 tomorrow afternoon. Staff Development Day here at our library is primarily like a professional development day where coworkers share ideas, networking, acknowledgements. We have breakout sessions, team building sessions, along with departmental updates, committee updates, updates from administration, and featured speakers. Under normal circumstances, Staff Development Day would take place during spring break while the students are away. But however, because of COVID, the students are in session right now. And because of that, we probably won't have as many participants with us tomorrow because they do have to provide services to our students. Also, because this is our very first virtual Staff Development Day, we wanted to try and follow the formats of previous Staff Development Days as closely as possible. And I think we pretty much pulled it off with the exception of one big difference. Normally, the day starts with a huge breakfast for all employees in the Faulkner Gallery. Unfortunately, we can't do that because we only have a limited amount of individuals here in the library. But the day does start with with us all being together. It's a great time for us to see each other because primarily the library is huge and we can go 3 or 4 months without seeing certain individuals. So in addition to the camaraderie, it also works because we can easily segue into the morning agenda right from Faulkner Gallery. And the same thing happens with lunch. We have a lunch again in Faulkner Gallery. After the lunch, we move on to the afternoon presentations. But we were able to figure out a way to provide lunch for individuals who will be in the building tomorrow. Those who wish to get lunch, we are going to hand deliver them lunch. In addition to our agenda, we do have 2 featured speakers. One speaker's name is Elena Norland, and Elena is the Professional Development DEI Coordinator for the Association of Southeastern Research Libraries. And her topic, in keeping with DEI, is, does East Carolina University's library system have a future-proof learning organization? And our second featured speaker is Dr. Kawana Bright. Dr. Bright is an assistant professor from East Carolina's College of Education, and her topic happens to be the role of privilege in developing and sustaining anti-racist and anti-bias workplaces. Going back to Dr. Bright again, Elena, quickly, we normally would have breakout sessions, but we didn't think we could pull that off because of COVID. But however, Elena, her presentation will include breakout sessions for those who are participating tomorrow. And then the day pretty much ends with lightning talks, or what I like to refer to as Did You Know? A Did You Know segment. Again, because we've lost a lot of contact, we don't have that daily contact with each other, we thought that lightning talks would be a great way for individuals to bring us up to date with some of their latest endeavors. And the lightning talks will last between 5 and 10 minutes each. And that's pretty much it for Staff Development Day. Amy?
I will share this PowerPoint so you guys can check out these links when you have the time for the 2 workshops that I mentioned ahead of time. And then here is our personal emails if you have any additional questions, or if we have time for questions now. We're all here and can answer them. Thank you.
Virtual applause. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. In the interest of time, maybe we can just have a Q&A session for both sessions at the end after our next presentation. But feel free in the meantime, if any of you want to capture that contact information, please feel free to do so. So thank you again, East Carolina University staff. Thank you so much for your first presentation. And so now we're going to transition over into our second presentation. This will be with the Elon University crew, Allison, Bryan, and Dr. Lisa Buchanan.
I always forget to unmute. So I am Allison, Bryan, and Lisa Buchanan and I, during the pandemic, when we absolutely should not be dreaming up new ideas, decided to dream up a new idea, and we started a book club that is focused on allowing practicing teachers in the local school system to engage around the pedagogy of book clubs, but also a way for them to discuss and think about the role that identity plays in their classrooms. So she and I started this must have been December, started really talking about it. And we began our meetings with over 80 participants. So we had tons of excitement and enthusiasm around this. We started in February. So we decided that this could be the first in a series of book clubs, and chose Look Both Ways by Jason Reynolds to be our first book to engage around. We chose that book for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons is that it is written by an Own Voices author, which we thought was really important for our teacher participants to think about. But also it is well reviewed for upper elementary all the way through high school age students. So it had wide-ranging appeal. We have regular meetings that Lisa and I co-facilitate. And we do them 2 times on the same day. So some participants come late in the afternoon and other participants come after they're home and probably fed children and getting ready to wind down for the evening. And of course, we are offering continuing education credits, which has been one way to sort of lure people in or build excitement around the idea, because the teachers enjoy the engagement, but also, of course, they need those CEUs. And we delivered the books to participants. So the teachers did not have to purchase or check out their own books. So it was nice for them to be able to have a book delivered to them. Do you want to talk about this, Lisa?
I can do this slide.
Yeah.
So, across the board, we had classroom teachers at the elementary, middle, and secondary level. We had support staff. We had school librarians. We have special educators, and also in relation to support staff, we had several counselor type positions. And so what we wanted to do was to create this space where they could think about identity and representation, sort of 2 reasons: to develop their own understanding of identity and representation, but also to think about how they might have conversations with K-12 students that they work with. So for a social worker to think about a context, and also a 5th grade teacher, right? We felt like this was a good model for being able to build community. So most of the teachers come from a local school system. Some of them already know each other because of, lateral planning and so forth, or having worked in various capacities. We have from first-year teachers to, I think one of the participants was sharing, this was like year 32 or something. So a wide range of experience, but building community outside of already knowing each other. So making even more connections. And then also too, a third reason was for Own Voices literature, to really have that as like a pillar of what we were doing. We also, about the community building, I just wanted to say quickly that we knew that one of the things Allison and I talked about that was immediate with this group, first of all, we launched this and we had like tons of responses within a couple of days. We went, 5 people, 20 people, 30 people. before we had enough time to send out a reminder, like, hey, if you want to do this, we were up to like 80 some participants. And so we talked about this for weeks now, that educators tend to have this sense of community that's unique to being in a school building together. You talk before school, you talk after school, you talk during planning. So this has been different for the last calendar year, right? And so that aspect of community building was really filling a bucket for a lot of participants, as they have not been in context with each other in the same way. So they were able to meet and talk together with fellow educators.
In fact, on the very first of our meetings, one of the participants said she was just so excited to talk to an adult that was not her husband or her mother-in-law. So they clearly missed human contact and discussion. In the meetings, as I said, we mentioned we had a few goals. We wanted to talk about how to run book clubs in a classroom, as well as engage around own voices literature, and be able to discuss different topics within a classroom. And so our meetings were divided sort of into 3 parts. We would make sure to share research and strategies around the practice of incorporating book clubs and different types of literature, and where to find good texts to share with students. And we would also allow participants to spend time in breakout rooms as well as the whole group setting. Mm-hmm. And in some of our meetings, the chat actually was where a lot of discussion happened. So there would be sort of a discussion in the whole group and a side discussion still related to the whole group discussion, where some people, it seemed, felt more empowered to share their ideas in the chat rather than unmuting and sharing out loud. And then one of the things that has turned out to be something that I have appreciated personally, and also as an educator, so I'm a librarian and an educator, is the importance of collecting data for our next meeting. So we were always sure to get feedback from our participants, and that feedback really was gold about what the participants wanted to talk more about, what they wanted to share more about, where they were in their growth. I appreciated Amy's group earlier, right before us, how they talked about this as being sort of a continuum, and we're always trying to do better. And with a group as large as ours, it's a little bit tricky to really be able to engage one-on-one and know how everybody is doing. So this information that we collected each time was invaluable as we began planning for our next meeting. So here are a few things that our participants have said about these meetings and this engagement. And you can, as you read through them, I won't read every single word to you, but you can sort of see that there is a lot of thought going on around the ideas of identity and how this will work in classrooms and things like that. The importance of the backgrounds of the authors and the backgrounds of the students. And of course, we can all relate to this one, the importance of having new materials, but budgets being cut. And this librarian particularly has $0 in her budget for this year. So this teacher, of course, trying to change her instruction from such a Eurocentric view, which I think is hard for some educators who were trained in one way and trying to embrace a new way. And of course, the importance of building relationships with children and families, being able to broaden your horizons.
And I would just add that quote, I think was also the section that this was taken from was, if you're familiar with the book, Look Both Ways. It's a collection of stories written about children and basically like their paths, right? So not just their literal path home, but right, their experiences. And so we had a lot of discussion in this particular meeting about the section of the book that we were on, and the children, not only a lot of times, we present people in hardship and overcoming hardship. That's very general to the canon, right? But they really got into talking about the children's just general lived experiences and how those shape and also how we often assume. And so there was a lot of good discussion about assumptions and how we bring assumptions in. We put assumptions on people. So it was good to see this. We talked about that in the first part of the meeting, and an hour later, this was something that a classroom teacher was still thinking about. And so many of these, as we looked across them, as Allison as a librarian and an educator, and me as an educator, thinking if the book club ended now, right? We have really had a successful, we've met a lot of our goals just in having people think about this, as this then informs their instructional planning. So, and again, this is the feedback that we're getting from them in the chat or in exit ticket, because even with offering 2 times each club meeting, we're still looking at about 40 participants. So giving them some smaller spaces to respond.
And this, of course, is also directly related to the book. They just want to know what's going to happen next and all the stories, how they'll come together. So to get them excited about reading also is such a So as we've mentioned, we've really been able to leverage technology in this space, whereas I do believe that if we had tried to launch this pre-COVID, we might have had some hesitance, because there was a time that I feel like teachers were not at a point where they could really embrace technology. And this way, in the pandemic teaching, they've sort of been forced to. So the ubiquity and the comfort with Zoom has allowed teachers to just hop right on and participate. Of course, Google Forms and Padlet were 2 tools that we've been using for exit tickets. And teachers can, of course, transition and use those into their classrooms as well. And then we talked in our last discussion about discussion strategies when you're working in an online environment. So we shared with them the tools of dot storming and Jamboard, and some had heard of them and some had used them and some hadn't. But it's been nice to be able to leverage the technology in order to build this community, and also allow the educators to use these tools as a student before they try to use them with their students as well. You want to talk about this?
Yeah. So that was a good segue into the lessons learned, because we've learned so much about how this was a broader opportunity for so many folks, because we used Zoom and maximizing that participation, not only with participants participating, having already used Zoom to some extent in their setting, but also thinking about, like we were just chatting this week or this past week, time-wise, people were able to log right on. They didn't have to drive over to our campus, right? And lots of people love being, face-to-face, but we really feel like this was on a weekday, right? Or these are on weekdays. So someone could dismiss, or right now our local system is having some time changes even with when students are being dismissed with bus sharing. And so for a lot of folks, they just may have wanted to participate, but they just couldn't make it across town to campus. So Zoom was a great opportunity there. The second bullet, if you're asking the right questions, you'll know what your participants want. That's just a thank you sort of back to the opportunity to collect data and really listen to what participants were interested in doing. We so often have the tendency as teachers to, think we know exactly how we want to plan something and get it all, scheduled out. And we really took a step back and said, the participants will let us know where they want to move. And that's a good thing for us to remember as teachers as well, right? Again, like I mentioned earlier, that it really addressed the lack of networking and community building that teachers and other educators have missed in this last calendar year. So it definitely addressed that. The bullet about identifying a funding source, this is kind of interesting. When Allison mentioned, we really got going in December, that's because it was finally funded in December. We actually started working on this back in August at the beginning of the semester. And we tried a couple of things and it wasn't funded. And so we could do this, right? If participants bought their own book, you could certainly offer that. And lots of clubs work like that and work really well, but we felt like providing a title to the participants would garner and leverage more participation. And so that was important to us. And so we went through a couple of different options and, weren't funded for different reasons, and that's okay. But now that we have been able to identify a funding source for this title, we're even more motivated to identify a source for our second and third titles in this series. The bullet about know your boundaries and set limits. So we had 85 people say, we would love to be a part of your book club. So we said, this is fantastic. Well, we teach during the day, but then we also teach at night often. And, we have between the two of us, we have six little people. And so we had to really be organized with ourselves to have boundaries that were healthy so that we could enjoy this. And also be fully able to engage in it. And so we had to really go back and forth thinking about that. So our encouragement to you would be, maybe consider a limit on participants. We might have to do that next time, and just think about limit setting and navigating. And then the last part, maximizing your social media presence. We know that this was the reason why this really caught wind and took off, is because people were sharing. Teachers love to share. They love to be in community with each other. So that worked out well for us, but also too, just maximizing that regardless of who your participants are, and making it easy, even with just doing the easy work from your phone Google form for responses and signing up initially. So just thinking about that and leveraging that was a big lesson learned.
So here's our contact information, and I think we have 1 or 2 minutes if there are any questions.
Yeah, so feel free to submit your questions in the chat if you have any for either of our presentation groups today.
I have a question for Amy's group, and just simply one thing Allison and I ran into is there's so many options for titles. So at what point were you like, okay, we're going to use Kendi's title, and you moved forward with it?
Yeah, we had talked about starting a book club in the spring. So I empathized with you guys a little bit. And then we were trying to collaborate with other committees in the library. And that just takes longer and longer to get people to agree. So I had read this in the summer on my own. We were able to purchase 10 additional physical copies throughout the library. So that was really important to us to be able to provide free physical copies, even though it is pretty widely available through different library apps and things like that. And I purchased my own copy because I enjoyed it so much. That was super important. And then we also, since we kind of started later to the game with that particular book, there were a lot of existing book discussion guides related to it. So I was able to pull different things for different chapters from a bunch of different LibGuides, a bunch of different library resources that had already kind of tried it out a few months prior. That just kind of enhanced our whole thing. So we took that one book and we made it last a few months, but we really could have added more sessions just with that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we are at 3:30, everyone. So I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to our presenters, and let's all give a virtual round of applause. Covered a lot of ground in 40 minutes together. Feel free, if you have additional questions, to reach out to them via their emails. And I believe those presentation slides will be available on the Launch website to you. So feel free to check that out. So again, everyone, thank you so much for your time, and everybody have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.